Welcome to the Freelance Journalism Podcast. I'm a big believer in facing your fears, having the difficult conversation, and not sticking your head in the sand. But today's guest was a tough one, even for me, because being sued as a journalist is one of my biggest fears, and as a freelancer, you often feel so unprotected. But Lisa Kwon had it happen to her, lived to tell about it, and has a lot of lessons for us in today's episode. I hope you learn as much and feel as encouraged as I did in having this conversation. Enjoy. Welcome, Lisa Kwon. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Katherine. I'm really excited to be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm Katherine Reynolds Lewis, founder of the Institute for Independent Journalists, whose mission is the financial and emotional sustainability of freelancers of color. Lisa Kwon is our guest today. She's a freelance reporter and writer covering pop culture and Los Angeles happenings. You can find her work on Vulture, Vice, Dirt, LA Taco, Los Angeles Public Press, and more. And I first became aware of your work, Lisa, unfortunately, when your coverage of illegal Airbnbs for Knock L.A. was the subject of a lawsuit. And that has always been one of my big hot buttons. So I'm really glad and excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah, likewise. There's a lot to unpack and find some fellow feeling in.
Can you start by telling us just how you got into journalism and what your career path has been like?
Sure. I never initially hadn't seen journalism as a viable career path for myself until later in my 20s. I had kind of pursued your run-of-the-mill corporate job and was equally just kind of getting a little disengaged and jaded by the motions of it. I realized in my sort of soul searching during this time in my life that I really wanted to cover Los Angeles in a way that hasn't been covered before. I wanted to look at it through a preservationist lens. I wanted to cover how the movement of diaspora communities have shaped and build Los Angeles with vivacity and culture and life. In tandem with that, there are a lot of issues that I felt were being undercovered or underreported, and maybe also even neglected for more glossier, shinier things that happen with in a city like LA, where it's very boostery. So yeah, I had started by first pitching to LA Taco and a few other grassroots magazines, and was very surprised at the reception to it. I think that I was pretty confident in the ideas that I had. It was just a matter of just finding someone who would listen to it. So I started off by covering beats in Koreatown in terms of from the small business side, how immigrant communities have moved into Koreatown beyond just Korean families and how they have affected and impacted Koreatown. From there, I had a greater interest in just covering issues that are covering various Los Angeles cities at large. Right now, or most recently, I've been really interested in covering the various grassroots movements that are happening through in underreported areas of Los Angeles. So there's a lot happening in San Gabriel Valley, for example, but also there's a lot of organizing that has happened around the housing market in areas like Inglewood and Compton. So those are issues that I want to continue to focus to today.
Wonderful. And let's get right into the heart of it. Tell us about what happened with your reporting for Knock LA. It's really the worst nightmare for so many freelancers. And I'd love to hear, why you started the project and when you did get pushback.
Sure. This happened. It wouldn't. I wouldn't have found this or seen this story as vividly as I did if it weren't for my organizing outside of journalism. So I had been doing various organizing and volunteering with various groups for several years. This is how I came to know No Olympics LA. They staunchly reject the idea of a healthy Olympics in Los Angeles and transnationally. No Olympics is the goal for on the transnational level as well. One of the issues that was percolating at the time of 2021 was the rise of Airbnbs, and it still is today. But something related to the Olympics, Airbnb had just then announced a 10-year partnership leading into the 2028 Olympics, which would cause a lot of concern as far as the reduction of housing stock, and the way that landlords and corporate housing companies would harass or try to remove tenants from rent stabilized housing, in order to turn them into more luxurious developments or for more attractive Airbnbs for tourists who just come and go. So I thought there was seed was planted there very intentionally. This is how I also had found and come across various tenants who were organizing their respective buildings, that were all owned by Dwell Management, which was run by Simone Shaw. I had enough testimonials and evidence from each tenant to know that they were being a suite of harassment techniques or tactics, and whether it's, neglecting to fix something in the apartment, or whether it is just kind of the quote unquote invasion of privacy, suite of things. So with that, I wanted to make this a larger story about raising awareness of illegally operated Airbnbs, because there's also no real political will to kind of hold landlords accountable who are renting out Airbnbs in their respective buildings. So although there are ordinances in place to kind of regulate Airbnb, there's just no political will, and so a lot of landlords can kind of make do with it. So that's a larger story. I wanted to focus in on the tenants and what their various organizing and struggle is, within Dwell Management. So I reported that story in the winter of 2021, and it officially had been published by Knock L.A. On April 25th, 2021.
Hmm. And then you got a cease and desist, and then what happened?
Yeah, I can get into that too. So it's been since 2021, since April 25th, 2021, shortly after, Simone had sent a letter to both Knock and myself asking just if they can take it down. This was around June. Knock had responded, "We're going to keep this up. We have all the grounds to believe that this was reported with fairness and with accuracy." So then she proceeded with a cease and desist, targeted or aimed at Knock L.A. On August 2021, at which point Knock had reached out to me about, gathering whatever information they needed to refute the cease and desist and to further stand on the assertion that they will keep this story up. At that point, I felt very good and positive about the rallying of support from the newsroom. And I was also involved in kind of providing evidence as well as my own stance on this. So Simone backed down after Knock responded back to her cease and desist, sort of like charge by charge, and refuting each. It wasn't until April 24th, 2022, which is 364 days after my piece went live, which is also within the window of time which that you can sue a journalist or a person for defamation or whatever they might have.
Hmm.
So she had filed it in time, a lawsuit against me. I actually did not know about this because it was just quietly submitted. Between April 2022 and January 2023, I was kind of in the dark. I didn't know whether she was making moves on her end or what she was discussing with her attorney, but I officially received a summons by email on January 24th, 2023. This was an email from the attorney saying that I have been served and that they are expecting a response in a prompt way. I had my suspicions. I mean, when I first received it, I was very scared.
Yeah.
Nervous. I did not know. I think I just felt very numb, which we can go into later. But I felt confused because, but also I just didn't want to engage. So I think I made a good judgment in not responding in just right there and then. I had forwarded it to Knock, and the attorney who had drafted their response to Simone's cease and desist, saying that, hey, I've officially been served. And mind you, I'll go back for a second. I think that Knock back in 2022, after they filed their response to her cease and desist, they let me know that should anything worsen from this, if I'm ever become the subject of her intimidation tactics, I would be protected or represented or helped out. This was all said via phone call. Um, there was a lesson to be learned there, but I can get into that later too. So it was with some confidence. I was like, hey, I forwarded this to Knox saying, hey, like I have officially been served, question mark. Um, I got a response later that day from Knox attorney who they've just been working with for various cases, and she said that she was not able to represent me, and that's when I first got caught by surprise because that was not what I had heard back in 2022. Um, there was some various back and forth between Knock and myself about getting some help, and then it kind of dropped off. I eventually had to find an attorney on my own, through various people that I've organized with who have heard of an attorney that might be able to help. Um, so yeah, I think I was in the right place by not responding to this email because what I did understand from later on is that it was not an official serve just yet. So it
Mm.
was until summer of 2023. So we just kind of bided our time a little bit, bought us some time, that the attorney, the plaintiff, served me by paper, which is a valid means of summoning a defendant to court. And then from there, the case was on.
Yeah.
So from summer 2023 until January 2024, it's been a lot of back and forth with my lawyer, kind of unearthing everything that I already sent to Knock. It kind of just felt like rinse and repeat again in a way. Um,
And
but
what was that like to have to like recreate your reporting and like I think about that experience, the scary part for me would not only of course be the risk and the expense of the lawsuit, but also, just the time that you take to go back and remember a story you did, a year or year and a half earlier.
that's true. Yeah, I mean, it was almost over 2 years ago that I actually had to like remember um just almost every single day that I had been reporting the story. Um, it's funny because there is a moment like even up until 2021 when I was working with Knock on their own cease and desist rebuttal, I felt supported and I felt confident that my story was watertight. But when you're doing it on your own, you start to question at times, like, did I do something wrong? Did I report
Yeah.
the wrong way in a way that was not, that didn't protect me, that didn't protect the editor? There's just a lot of questions that go in the air because once a lawyer, also like if this is your first time ever being sued, and God forbid anyone ever gets sued, like a lot of like you just start to feel small. And as if there's something in there that you could have be held accountable for or that you did something wrong. I know in the back of my mind and just in my heart of hearts, this was a watertight story. But that's just that lingering thing that just happens when, a finger is pointed at you and you just seem alone and you have to go to the lengths of securing the attorney and whatnot. Um, yeah, so I think that's where that sort of isolation came from. Um,
And can you quantify it all, like the amount of money you spent and then the amount of time that you could have been working, right?
That's true. Ultimately, I incurred, well, I can finish. So to kind of explain the fees that I ended up with. So we filed a anti-SLAPP motion. Um, so SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. It was introduced in the state of California in 1992. They're readily seen and reviewed. Well, anti-SLAPP motions rather. So it's a way for defendants like myself to dismiss lawsuits filed against us for exercising our First Amendment rights, whether that's something as small as complaining about a small business somewhere online versus, or it's, writing about a public figure. And here the lawyer, or sorry, not the lawyer, the landlord that I had mentioned in my story is a public figure in that she advertises her apartment buildings. She also has gone on a podcast to talk about her experience as a landlord. Um, so we were ready to review my anti-SLAPP motion in court to dismiss as many of the charges as possible that Simone had put in her lawsuit, but it also wouldn't have guaranteed that the whole entire lawsuit was wiped. So there might still be charges that the judge reviews and says you still need to defend this charge, which would have also incurred, which would have incurred an additional charge on the lawyer to start working on that, where it's like an actual like trial. So the first step for any journalist in the state of California who is being charged with a slap would be to try an anti-slap motion. That was the recommendation of my attorney. Ultimately, Simone wanted to settle out of court. She was pretty persistent about it in January. It was almost to a point where like there was a fire in me that like you really wanted to kind of intimidate as a way of kind of not having this in court. And that's just kind of my perspective of things here. But I am relieved that we were able to settle out of court because I still was responsible for legal and court fees that I incurred over time just from using my lawyer and the hours of work that we put together. So ultimately, we settled out of court, and I was left with $10,760.58 in legal and court fees. And that's all on me because if we had gone to court, there might have been some discussion of, like say I win the trial, there would have been discussion of how much could that covered. But also as a freelancer, I just can't play, I can't play risk.
Yeah, right.
I was okay with settling, and that was also the recommendation of my attorney at the time. Said that this is a really good deal because I also get to keep the article up on Knock.
Right. And then you were able to GoFundMe to cover that. Thank
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, I put up a GoFundMe pretty much soon after we settled out of court. Um, it was overwhelming in that within a course of a day, I was able to recoup all of my fees and be able to pay my attorney back in a timely manner. Um, so I'm really grateful for the community and just whoever this reached. I think that's a combination of other fellow freelance journalists who felt this plight before, but also people were who are also impacted by illegally operated Airbnbs or just sort of the state of the housing market in their respective cities. So yeah, I think it resonated with both parties.
Amazing. And looking back, what would you do differently based on all of these really tough experiences?
Yeah, I mean, as a freelancer, this is one of the last things that thought would ever happen. But I think that this has put me firmly rooted me in reality. Like, if I'm going to write about people who are in places of power or money, like, I do need to be assured that I am protected. Something that I choose will be doing differently is to actually get firm confirmation on the newsroom's policy, insurance policy, and to make sure that it includes contributors or outside contributors or freelancers like myself. Um, to have that in writing is even better. I'd love to know, like I think that when I pitch and a newsroom is interested, I would also ask the hard question of like, this is like I might be up against a very litigious person. Like, what are your grounds or protocol for taking care of a reporter who is doing some tenuous reporting or reporting on a tenuous issue? Do you have not just insurance, but like, will your lawyers be reliable, or could I actually have that in writing? I think I felt assured by that verbal confirmation that I will be supported legally. So when that didn't come through, it was a shock to me. But just to have that honest conversation with a newsroom is important. Also, if it's a newsroom with who upholds progressive values, like it would behoove them to even think this through. So
Right.
as much as it's a hard question, I think it's important to have that conversation to hold even such a newsroom accountable and making sure that they're also thinking about this in a very legitimate and serious way. Um, yeah, so I think those are the two main takeaways that I had as far as what I will do, whether it's, pitching newsrooms of similar values or, just anywhere outside of the Los Angeles media world. Like this is something that is very important to me now because I still want to write about the state of the Airbnbs in California or in LA. That desire is not gonna stop. So I just hope that newsrooms will take freelancers just as seriously as staff writers in terms of what they have to say.
Well, you helped me, Lisa, because when you and I first started talking about having today's conversation, I was about to take an assignment that actually involved a litigious party. And
Mm.
because all of this was fresh in my mind, I asked the editor, not only can you cover me, which usually if you say that, they'll say, oh, sure, sure, sure. But then I said, can you just talk to your editor in chief and make sure I'm named on the insurance policy as a contributor? And we took that extra step because I think you do sometimes get complacent and say, oh well, it's too much trouble, or you don't want to scare off the publication or whatever else.
Yeah,
So
that really resonates with me. That's the whole idea of like, I don't want to scare off the publication. Sometimes I do also have to remember, like, if the publication is very turned off by that, then that's just not the place for a story like mine.
right,
Um, yeah,
I
so
love that.
I also think that even if a newsroom doesn't have an insurance that would cover you, there are options that you can explore to find insurance for yourself. It's hard because it is very expensive that it almost feels as if it's better to have a hard conversation with your editor or the newsroom to cover you, and even just to have it be reviewed by a lawyer. Like for something new that I also learned is just kind of like the removal of something like an indemnity clause so that even if the newsroom does ultimately have to use their insurance and cover something, like it doesn't all fall on you to cover or to recoup that again on the newsroom. There's so many ways in which freelancers can often be held responsible for and ultimately have to pay for writing the story that they wanted out.
Yeah,
Through
we just did a webinar on insurance and talked about some of those options. And I do think there are more and more good services out there and free legal services too.
yeah.
So, um, looking back, also, I'd be curious, is there, I don't know if there's anything that positive that came out of that whole experience? You sort of, I imagine it was extremely stressful and draining and isolating, but when you put it into context, I don't know if there's anything silver lining.
Yeah, there was. I am really glad in a weird way to have put out a GoFundMe. Like in the process of seeing funds being raised, I had a very out of body experience where the GoFundMe just took a life of its own and people were speaking for me. Um, Very strange. I Again, this is why I hope that, no one ever is really put in this position. But the silver lining for me there was I did come across a lot of other journalists who are freelancing who have come to me with fellow feeling and also have let me know they've been in similar situations or that they themselves have been scared to pitch a really great story of theirs to a newsroom for this very same reasons of I don't think the newsroom will protect me, or the newsroom will be kind of annoyed by my persistence in being protected. Um, I think that there is solidarity to be built with those very freelancers and just some sort of solution as far as like that these freelancers are also in charge, kind of charged to look for the stories that staff writers are often too occupied to dig deeper on. So just trying to level that sort of playing field in which we are seen, um, but to actually receive personal accounts from other people made me feel a lot less alone in this. Um, yeah, and that's been really helpful in that there's people that I can reliably go back to about, how would they approach this or whatnot. And obviously there are writers groups out there who share reliable resources and their own perspectives, but never to the vulnerability of saying, hey, I've been sued, what, or hey, I've been sued or I'm scared of being sued. So just to have that sort of raw conversation about that's also like very money focused is has been helpful.
Amazing. And just wrapping up, is there anything else that you'd like to share about your journalism that you're doing, or any advice you have for other freelancers?
Yeah, I think something that has put things into perspective for me. I think this was a way to for friends to help me cope is that, like a lot of lawsuits do settle out of court. So in the grand scheme of things, like lawsuits are often used to intimidate and there's no reason that someone would intimidate unless you were saying something that was very valid and true and needed to be heard. Um, so people in power will always find a way to silence you or intimidate you out of saying something, but it's actually in a weird, twisted way. Like if someone's onto you, it's a good thing. You're on the right path, and you should say it with your chest.
And you are an example of living to tell, the go through some of our freelancers' worst nightmares and come out of it with stronger, I think, purpose. And I hear a lot of wisdom. Lisa, do you have any business or money advice for other freelancers?
Yeah, I my main advice, or just from my own perspective, has been that I have balanced my freelance work with a day job since I started writing in 2013 or 2013, 2018. And it has been the same since, and I've been very meticulous about finding those jobs that have a good balance that allow me to close my work laptop, by 3, 4, or 5, in order for me to support the ideas that I do have. I think there are pros and cons to this. I think that I'm going to be honest, sometimes you just have those sleepy days or just kind of when you're just in a more lethargic period. But I would also say that those lethargic periods aren't periods of unproductivity. I think that it actually means something of value for you to rest and for your ideas to percolate. Um, but yeah, if you can, I know it's really hard out there just to find something like that in the job market, but I've been fortunate to be able to balance all the work that I do on the freelancing side with some sort of day job to at least help ease me in terms of any sort of financial woes.
No, I think it's a great tip. I often feel like, in the past 15 years, I've been a full-time freelancer. There have been years where I'm like 80% of my freelance work is for pay, right? It's not those passion projects. So I might as well have a day job, right?
Yeah.
At a certain
Right.
point.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to have some sort of that reassuredness, especially because freelance work can just ebb and flow and you just never know.
Okay, great tip. Thank you so much again, Lisa, and good luck with all of your work.
Thanks so much.
The Freelance Journalism Podcast is a production of the Institute for Independent Journalists. Our mission is the emotional and financial sustainability of freelancers of color. Learn more about our work at theiij.com and use the code POD10 for a discount on our annual conference and other events open for registration now. That's POD number 10. And please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or both. You can find our free webinars and other offerings on YouTube. And your recommendation and sharing with friends is the greatest compliment and helps us discover new listeners. Thanks for listening.